So let's start. What are the things that I would do today to improve my language learning journey? The first thing I would do, and I'm trying actually to do, and to everything I'm talking about today is just a reflection on how my teaching methods and my experience in learning. And you will know I'm not interested in learning only languages, but I'm interested on how to acquire skills and knowledge very efficiently. My brain is really always seeking new information, and maybe some of you does experience the same. So here I really would like to create a space where we share opinions and experiences and know-how somehow on how to be extremely efficient in providing our brains with the food that our brain craves. Okay. At first, studying a foreign language, this is one of the most challenging and I would say satisfying skills and experiences one can have. And in my opinion and in my experience teaching and learning, the number one obstacle to reaching this skill is anxiety. Okay, and anxiety may sound superficial, so let's divide it up in smaller pieces. Okay, so anxiety can be born because of a number of things. There can be anxiety to not perform well enough, and this may sound counterintuitive because sometimes you're only practicing for yourself. For example, I tell my students, speak out loud alone whenever you can. Try to describe what you are doing by yourself. Are you doing the dishes? Are you washing the dishes? Just describe what you are doing in your target language. But many times people cannot do that because they obviously incur in things they don't know. They don't know how to describe. So they end up not doing the exercise or not doing that long enough to get some results. And why are people stopping here? If they're just practicing and performing for themselves, nobody is hearing. The number one problem is that being incapable to perform perfectly, the exercise will undermine significantly your self-esteem. Okay, it's gonna draw up your perfectionism, and perfectionism means if I'm not doing this exercise perfectly, it's not worth doing it. I'll be exposed as somebody who lacks a lot of vocabulary and surely will be in that position. And that kind of exercise is exactly targeted at refreshing vocabulary you already know, but also to find out what do you lack. Because the first thing to build the city that you need, that is the language, you need to understand what are the bricks that you need, the pieces of grammar that you do need in order to do that thing. So this is just an example to tell you why anxiety could be the number one obstacle, because anxiety is triggered by a number of things. For example, perfectionism and in general every threat to your self-esteem. But the very problem that anxiety causes is that it stops you from practicing and from finding out very specifically what are the bricks that you're lacking in order to build your city. So as language learning is too vast of a topic to be tackled altogether at the same time, I think that one of the most efficient strategies is to niche down your learning path. Okay, and in order to do that, you have to be very conscious on what do you want to achieve with that language. Okay, what are your goals, but not just abstract goals, and we are discuss about that in a second. But if you can be very pragmatical with your goal, you can start from day one doing the thing that you wanna do with the language. Language is a skill, is not just knowledge. So you wanna do something with your language. If you can be practical in your goal, you can start be practical with your language in day one, and you can start to be very pragmatic from day one, understanding, discriminating what do I need from this infinite pile of things I have to do, I have to know in order to speak the language, what I specifically need in order to do the practical thing that I want to do today. And by doing that over and over, you would acquire the skill set that you would need to do that thing. And your motivation is not gonna drop so easily as it would be if your goal, if your strategy was to start learning the entire grammar book of your target language. We are speaking about anxiety preventing you to do practice and find out what you practically need to achieve your practical goal. So let's speak a little bit more about this as a second point. Your language learning journey is not going to be done through a manual, or at least not exclusively, or is not going to be the same journey of anybody else. Okay, you can share traits of your language learning experience with other individuals. For example, you could have the same mother tongue. You could be at the same starting point. Maybe you're a complete beginner with the target language. You could share the fact that you do another language, okay, and that other language is the same. So you would have something in common. Maybe you could also share the practical goal in very generic terms. Maybe you and your mate, you both would like to learn Russian for international business. Let's say that. I'm speaking about Russian because it's one of the languages that I really struggle to master, and I really would like to master for a number of personal reasons. But even if you and your mate on this learning journey do share everything, included the practical goal, your practical goal is gonna be actually in details very different from his own. Maybe you would like to live the language in a different way. If you're able to be very specific in your goal, you will find out that you can start practicing in a less overwhelming way and in a more personal way. So the point here is try to find a very practical goal. For example, I would like to speak Russian because I somehow would like to be mediator among people. I have this idea, let's say that. I have the desire that I will be able to communicate directly with people to understand their point of view on things, and I would be able to work as a mediator between different interests and different cultures. And I also believe that I would like to be a doctor sometime in the future. And I think that I would like to be able to speak in medical terms in Russian, for example. I don't know, this could sound absolutely crazy for everybody out there, but it does make sense for me. So that is narrowing down my goal for me, and it's depicting a kind of clear image of myself in the future. So if I had to start learning Russian, let's say I'm starting right now, I would definitely not follow the path that, for example, I was put through at university. So I probably wouldn't start for grammar. Okay, grammar is absolutely essential because it's the toolbox for expressing what you want to express, but it doesn't make sense to start with that if what I'm seeking is actually personal connection. and personal understanding of the culture of people. Being so aware of my goal, of my personal goal, makes me able to start somewhere very specific, very interesting to me, and very personal. So I won't be following something standard, I will follow something personal. And by following something extremely personal, I would be able to have a very clear direction. Having a clear personal direction keeps you motivated because it's easier to master some basic knowledge or some basic skills if you can narrow down the things you have to learn. For example, let's speak about vocabulary. If you have to know 10,000 words in order to be an intermediate speaker in Russian or in my target language, that would easily sound very overwhelming. And furthermore, if we consider that in languages such as Russian, we have a declension chart for every noun, this would incredibly expand the number of actual forms of words that I had to learn in order to master, to be able to use these words myself actively or to recognize them when written or uttered by somebody else. So being specific, for example, I want to be able to speak about emergency, okay, in the medical field in Russian. That is gonna narrow down things, and narrowing things down will let me master these things easily. At least not easily, but quicker, okay, and faster. And if I can master at least something that is of high interest to me, very close to my objective in a relatively short amount of time with a relatively small amount of energy, then I'm gonna tackle my first obstacle, my anxiety, because I would reassure myself that I'm able to do that. I'm able to achieve what I want to achieve. I'm capable. I'm on the right path to do it. So let's remember the first obstacle, anxiety, and let's take that in high consideration. The second obstacle is interest. If you lose interest, you're not gonna study. And if you're probably working, study something else, living your daily life, you need to be interested because things have to be relevant to you. Okay, so first obstacle, anxiety, with everything else implied and connected to it, interest and personal relevance, second things. And just to go a bit more in depth in this second point, interest can be your, like, how would I say that? Something that your polar star somehow, like when you have, because one of the third problem that we have when we learn a language is that nowadays we have too many options, too much material, and we are easily overwhelmed and paralyzed by decision paralysis. What should I study? What manuals should I follow? Should I study more grammar? Should I memorize more verbs? Should I follow this book? Should I follow this other one? If you have interest as your polar star, you will start from there. And let me tell you something. Whatever you choose is gonna be effective as long as you do that. As long as you put into practice the first strategy or second strategy. Okay, I lost track of everything I said, but the first, let's say, and most important strategy that you should apply. Having a system to recollect and not revise, but retrieve what you learned. So in many language learning systems and books and whatever you could consider reading or take into account when thinking, learning about learning strategies, you would definitely, surely encounter somebody telling you you need a system like, for example, Anki, of flashcards based on the brain retention timing that will help you make things stick in your brain forever. And as a teacher, I do know that the number one thing that causes frustration in my students is that they have to ask me the same thing over and over. And they are well aware of that. They are well aware that they are committing the same error, the same mistakes over and over. But it's not them being like slow somehow. They are not at all. The problem is they don't have into place a system that allows them to remember the things we studied together over time. So if you are just going to your class with your tutor, with your teacher, whatever you're doing, and you're learning new things, and you surely do, or you're reading your favorite book and learning a couple of new words, whatever you're doing, you're learning. We were starting from point number one. So everything you do, as long as it's interesting and personally related to you, is gonna be fine for you. It's gonna teach you something. So expose yourself to whatever kind of input of the target language you wanna pick, and that is gonna teach you a lot. But for you to improve and to develop your abilities, you need to remember the things you were learning. So put into practice a system like flashcards, like I personally use Anki, as I think most people do, as a system, but you can find whatever you want to. Find a system to remember things and to retrieve the things you learned. Yes, finally, be confident that everything you're doing is gonna be helpful, but also be aware that learning takes time and nobody wants to hear that, and you would certainly be able to find strategy to diminish the time. And actually, if we think about that, what's the struggle with things taking time? We spend a lot of time doing a lot of things. We are impatient, but what if the problem was not actually taking time, the language learning, but the problem was that we really are looking forward to be able to do the thing we want to do in the language with the language. We just want to have some results. And why do we want to have some results? Because we want to feel reassured. We want to have the satisfaction of being able to do something new. And we want to have the ability to do the things that we are looking forward to do in the target language. So if you can structure your language learning, taking into account of that, giving yourself prizes or creating the structure so you can have satisfactions from being able to do something, even if it's gonna take you 3 years to master to a fluent level the language, but if during those 3 years you were already able to do at least some of the things you wanted to do with the language, then it's not gonna matter you that it's taking you 3 years to do that, because the 3 years is not the point. The point is what you are able to do. The point is what you learned in the process. I think we covered a lot of things today. Maybe this is enough. I could consider putting things a bit more in order next time, but take that just as a simple starting chat about this point. Let me know if you have any inquiries, any interest into something. We can focus on that, and I would really love to hear your thoughts, because yes, I am like a professional in this field, but I have one certainty: nobody is done learning anything. So I would like this to be the policy of my life, never stop learning, never stop considering feedback. So you're very welcome if you have any idea, any experience. Thank you very much, and see you next time. Bye.